Our official bell, for those folks who don't know, is down the street about 10 blocks from me in a hotel locked up where we normally have our meetings. And it's a very large brass bell, so we don't bring it to our homes to start the meetings. But we still want to start with a bell. We still want to acknowledge that we want to welcome everybody that's here tonight. There are many, many guests. And in a few minutes, I'm going to ask Randall just to tell us a little bit about who's here. But so far, we got about 28, maybe a few more folks online who are going to be joining us. So just for everybody's information, I'm going to take the screen over for a second. First of all, our welcome. We would like to welcome all of you to our meeting. And our meeting is something a little bit different than others, that we are a very small club. And our club is growing, but it is growing internationally, not locally. We have attracted a lot of people from around the world because our opinion is that we should be Rotary International. And it goes along with our club title, name of our club, Rotary Club St. Petersburg International. And we want to focus on that because we think that international is where the key is for so many of the problems that we have around the world. Be it peace, be it hunger, be it medicine, all these different things I think can be solved if we bring more of the nations together. So we're very proud to be St. Petersburg International Club of St. Petersburg, and we certainly want to welcome all of you this evening. Tonight's agenda, our secretary and I will try to welcome all the different guests that we have here first. I'll make a short presidential introduction as the president of the club. We'll talk just briefly about our projects. We don't want to bore everybody with our minor projects, but we will talk about them just briefly. I will introduce our guest tonight. Our guest speaker is Peter Kyle. He will speak to us, and then after he is finished, we'll allow question and answer period for some of you who might have questions for him. I'm really looking forward to his speech tonight, and I think it's going to be very intriguing. So as we get into it, if you can think of a question you have, please hold it, and at the end, we will ask questions. Then I will go into the planning for our club that we have to tell all of our members about and let them know about what's coming on. And for all of you visitors that are out there, I want to let you know when our next online meeting is, so that in case you decide you want to come back, and then we'll have our closure. That's what we're going to be doing tonight. Now, as you all know, we have traditions in Toastmasters, in Rotary. I just finished a Toastmaster meeting 3 hours ago. In Rotary, we have traditions. And as the gentleman from India was saying, they sing a song. Something that we started last year doing, we had our newest member reading the four-way test every time when we started our meeting. And it was a very nice thing to do. Well, our secretary, Randall Eastman, has been working on a project for a while now about trying to get the four-way test in many, many different languages. We know it's already done in many, but with all the different countries we have, why don't we have the four-way test in every language? And why don't we share that among other countries and other people? As tonight we have guests from several different countries, we could provide different languages. That's going to be coming in the future. So for right now, I'm going to ask all 28 of you to participate in something that we're going to do as our ritual for our club. Okay, so if you'll follow along, I'm sure you're all going to know exactly what I'm going to be doing here in just a moment. This is our agenda I talked about. The four-way test. It's a four-way test of the things that we say and do. We also think these things, and it's important that we think them. What I'm going to ask everybody, all 28 of you to do, is to turn on your microphones. Unmute yourself, please. Everybody, unmute yourself. Turn on your microphone for everybody. Okay? Everybody unmute themselves. All right. I'm going to show on the screen the four-way test. And as I ask you, I'm going to ask everybody to please repeat the four-way test. So the very first one of the four-way test is it the truth? Everybody
is it the truth?
Very good. Second one, is it fair to all concerned.
Is it
To all
concerned?
Very good. Third one, will it build goodwill and better friendship?
build goodwill and better friendship.
Better friendship.
The last one is, will it be beneficial to all concerned?
Beneficial to all concerned.
Okay, so you paid your price of entry. You get to hear Peter speak tonight, and that was your price of entry. We need to remember those things, and we need to keep that in our mind. I don't know how you folks do it, but for me, I have one of the little Rotary four-way test coins that I keep in my wallet. And in case somebody asks me what the four ways are, and if I'm having difficulty, because sometimes as we get older, we forget a few things, I pull out my coin and I've got that. That's tradition for me because I'm an ex-military man and I have what they call a military coin, that if you got the coin in your pocket and you go to a bar and somebody challenges you, if they challenge you and you've got the coin in your pocket, they have to buy. If they challenge you and you don't have the coin in the pocket, you have to buy. So in the military, we carried those military coins with us forever. After retirement and being in Rotary, I now carry my Rotary coin everywhere because I never know when somebody's going to challenge me and I don't want to pay for drinks, so I carry my coin. I think all of us need to have some way to remember that four-way test, be it on a business card, be it on a note in our purse or our wallet, or in a coin you carry in your pocket. We just need to think about it because the founders who established this Rotary, when they came up with the four-way test, it is a very good way to ask ourselves in business, in politics, in medicine, in schools. It's a good way to ask ourselves, are we being fair? Are we concerned about the people we're dealing with? And if we follow those, people are going to want to deal with us and be with us for a long, long time. So I hope all of you keep that in mind, and hopefully we will continue to build this emphasis the way we're going. Next thing on the schedule is projects. So I need to just share my screen again momentarily here. Projects. We have two projects that are started for us. One is almost finished, and the other one is just recently got started. I know that Walter is online, and one of our projects that we have is that we found some other Rotary clubs who were buying ventilators for hospitals and schools to help ventilate the air so that they can try to help in this coronavirus to keep the contamination down and so forth. We joined in with them. We purchased some of them, and we're now getting ready in the near future that we're going to be putting them in locations. And Walter was in charge of that project. And Walter, if you just give us a couple sentences about where we're at and what we're doing.
Yeah, sure, Michael. As reported, we're talking here about some air purifiers, UV-based ultraviolet technology, which can purify the air. So we have discovered some of our homeless people organizations where we want to deliver them. I think they came from Taliati, but I'm not sure if I'm mistaken here. Alexei Grichin is here as well. But they arrived and I've received last week the information that they're here in a school where we can store them. Tomorrow I'm going to pick up those who are assigned to our club. And following this, I think in the next 1 or 2 weeks, we can bring them into the 3 to 4 venues which will be which will benefit from this purification machines.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Walter. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our other project that many of you know about, I say many because I know some of you here on the screen contributed to it, is what we call the Rotary Bench Project. If you've ever been to St. Petersburg and to the Hermitage, maybe the world's second best museum in the world, if you've ever been there, you notice that there are benches around the outside. Well, what we have done is that we've designed a bench with the Rotary logo on it, and they're replacing the benches around the Hermitage, and now we will have benches around there that have the Rotary logo so that people from around the world who come to the Hermitage to see the museum will be sitting on a bench that has a huge Rotary logo on it. It also has the dedication names of those people who contributed or those clubs who contributed. And we just found out early this week, on this past weekend, they went and removed the old benches. So where the old benches are out now, there's a hole in the ground, dirt on an asphalt area. And they're getting ready to prepare that for our benches to be going in. So we're hoping by the last week in September that the benches are going to go in, and we'll have a celebration to that project will be completed. But we have to say that there was many clubs. I believe the total was 8 different clubs, about 40 different people making contributions individually plus clubs, all coming together to try and make this, to increase the notoriety of Rotary around the world. And we couldn't think of a better place to put our logo, our names, in front of the Hermitage, where it's going to be seen by millions of people every year. So that's our other project, and it is getting near completion. It's been 2 years already, and hopefully by September it'll be finished. So those are our 2 primary projects. We have a few other very small ones locally, and I have been contacting some people in other countries talking about some schools in Cambodia and some other people that I talked to in Thailand who could use our help, and we'll see what happens with those future projects, but they're not developed yet. So that's just a little bit of project update on our part from what we have. Okay, after the project update, now comes our introduction of our guests. This is the fun part. This is what most of you came here for. This is what you came to hear, what you came to see. So we're going to make sure that you get what you came for. Our guest tonight is Mr. Peter Kyle. Now, you can see his beautiful picture on his page here. He is already on screen, already online with us. I'm just going to read you a little bit of information about Peter. Some of you know him much better than I do, and I only got introduced to him recently online and not even in person. So probably you know him better than I do. This week we have a very special guest, Mr. Peter Kyle, whom you can rightly say is one of the most important people in the Rotary world. What is interesting, however, is that he's also a foundation alumni. In 1972, as a new graduate, he was awarded a Rotary Foundation Ambassadorial Scholarship to study in Virginia in the United States. It appears to have had a big impact on his life because it changed him very much. Prior to assuming his current role as Rotary International Director, where he will represent zones 33 and 34 for the next 2 years, Peter was Dean of the Rotary Representative Network at the United Nations. He will explain more about this and the Rotary's involvement in the United Nations today. It is without further ado or delay that I would like to introduce you to Mr. Peter Kyle. And Randall, if you'll turn it over to Peter, we'll be ready for his speech.
Well, thank you, President Michael. That was a very nice introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. I'm delighted to be with you. It's a special treat for me to be presenting to a club in St. Petersburg. I might just add that some years ago, I was invited to join the World Bank. It was in 1991, just about the time that the former Soviet Union collapsed and all the republics became independent. I had been doing some privatization work in New Zealand. The World Bank heard about it, offered me a job. I reflected on that for about 30 seconds, took the offer, and a few months later, my wife and I and our 2 children moved to Washington, D.C., back to Virginia, where I had spent a very wonderful year as a Rotary Scholar in the early 70s. And within 2 weeks of arriving in Washington, I was on a plane to Moscow, and I spent the next 5 years commuting almost every month to Russia, working on the transition from a socialist legal system to one more closely aligned with market principles. To some extent we were successful, to some extent we were not successful. Those of you who live in St. Petersburg will know much more about this than I do. We had a lot to do with voucher privatization. I had the pleasure of visiting St. Petersburg on a couple of occasions, visiting the Hermitage, which I agree with you, Michael. Probably, if not the best, the second best art museum in the world. And I must congratulate you on the project of putting the Rotary symbol on chairs outside the museum. What an innovative, creative way to promote awareness of Rotary. And let me also congratulate you on the meeting. You're very well organized. This is great to have an agenda. I've been giving a lot of presentations, more in America, but quite a few overseas. And they're not, by and large, they're not quite as well organized as you are. So congratulations on that. And I want to acknowledge also Randy. Thank you for facilitating my presentation today. We've been in close contact for the last couple of years on humanitarian work that Randy has been doing in North Korea, which is just an amazing story. And that's perhaps for another time. And I'd also like to acknowledge the other guests on the call. There are several familiar faces, some from Washington, D.C. and from other parts of the world. Thank you for joining the call. So I've been asked to talk a bit about Rotary's relationship with the United Nations. And I think it's a very interesting and exciting topic. I'm delighted to have this opportunity. So let me go straight in and hopefully there'll be some time for some questions at the end of the presentation. So let me just set out the context. As you all know, Rotary started in 1905. We started fairly slowly. By 1910, there were about 12 Rotary clubs. But the dominant theme that was emerging in those early days was the need for peace. There was concern that forces of nationalism were taking over in Europe. And as we know, in 1914, war broke out between Germany and England. And that dominated Rotary clubs' thinking for several years. The war finished in 1918. In 1921, Rotarians met in Edinburgh, and they adopted a resolution calling for Rotarians to promote international understanding, goodwill, and peace. And those words, international understanding, goodwill, and peace, have become the key element, the fourth element of Rotary's object. And of course, they are the foundation for the Rotary Foundation. Next year, we will celebrate the 100th anniversary of the adoption of those words. Rotary continued to grow quite rapidly in the 20s and 30s, but in the late 30s, once again, the forces of nationalism appeared. And in 1939, once again, war broke out between Germany and England. In 1940, at the Rotary International Convention in Havana, Cuba, of all places, and I might just sidetrack and say that at that time, there were 58 Rotary clubs in Cuba. Currently, there are none. But at that convention, Rotarians passed a resolution calling, amongst other things, for respect for human rights. That was the first time those words, respect for human rights, had entered into the international lexicon. And those words became the foundation for the United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was signed in 1948. In 1942, a number of senior Rotarians who were concerned about the impact of the war on education, scientific research, cultural traditions and monuments. This group met in London and they passed a resolution which became the basis for UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. In 1944, President Truman and Prime Minister Churchill decided that it was time that the world started to establish an organization which would hopefully prevent war forever. And that was the start of the effort to draft the United Nations Charter. Rotary was one of a very small number of organizations who were invited to send lawyers and others to participate with officials from the Soviet Union, from China, from the United States and the United Kingdom on the drafting process. And in 1945, in June, when the United Nations Charter was signed in San Francisco, 49 out of the 800 delegates were Rotarians. I should say that looking back over the history of Rotary, and I've done a lot of reading, Rotary's impact on the world in a relative sense was probably at its peak in the 30s and 40s. Prior to the Second World War, the concept of non-governmental organization was virtually unknown. The only organization of any consequence that was an NGO, a non-governmental organization, was Rotary. So when the charter was signed in 1945, Rotary and one other organization, the Red Cross, were the only two members who were invited to accept consultative status with the UN Economic and Social Council. And that's quite a tribute to the impact of Rotary at that time. In the 30s and 40s, of course, the Rotary classification criteria were applied rather more strictly than is currently the case. You really did have to be the chief executive or the managing partner or the general manager of an organization. And of course, it was only males at that time. So Rotary was a very prestigious organization. So in 1946, someone in the United Nations decided it would be a good idea to establish an internship program to bring young people from all around the world to New York to observe the workings of this new body. Great idea, but no money. What did they do? They approached Rotary for a grant. And Rotary made one of its first grants, $18,000, to fund the first UN internship program. That was in 1946, and in 1947, we started the Rotary Ambassadorial Scholarship Program. So the internship program was a forerunner to the Ambassadorial Scholarship Program. The relationship between Rotary and the United Nations really went into abeyance in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. This was the time of the Cold War. But in the 1980s, 1985 in particular, Rotary re-engaged with the United Nations as part of the Global Polio Eradication Initiative. As you will recall, we partnered with WHO, with UNICEF, and then later on with the Gates Foundation, also CDC, Gavi, the Global Alliance for Vaccines, and since then, a number of other partners. But it was in the mid-80s that we really reconnected in a significant way with Rotary. In 1991, the board decided to formalize the relationships that were beginning to emerge between Rotary and the United Nations by establishing the Rotary Representative Network, which Michael mentioned in his introduction. This is the body that oversees Rotary's relations with the United Nations and other international organizations. There are about 18 entities in the network, including UNICEF, UNESCO, UN Environment Program, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, plus a number of international organizations, such as the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the African Development Bank, the European Union, the Commonwealth of Nations, the Arab League, the African Union. And Rotary has appointed representatives, ambassadors with a small a, in the cities where those organizations are based. So we have 2 Rotarian representatives in Rome, 2 in Paris, we have 3 in Geneva, 2 in Brussels, 2 in London, 4 in Washington, DC, 6 in New York, and we have others in Addis Ababa, we have 3 in Nairobi, we have 1 in Cairo. We have a total of 32 representatives. The chair of that group is called the Dean, and I had the good fortune to serve as the Dean for the last 2 years. I've had a number of what I regard as dream assignments in Rotary. But being the Dean of the Rotary Representative Network was one of the highlights of my Rotary career. I think there is so much potential for developing relations between Rotary and various UN bodies. And I was in many ways sorry that I had to give it up because I've joined the RI Board of Directors. So to give you a few examples of what that network has done, for many years, the main activity was the Rotary Day at the United Nations. And for a long time, that was the third most significant event on the Rotary calendar. After the International Convention, the International Assembly, was the Rotary Day at the UN in New York. The board would meet either just before or just after that gathering. In more recent years, and we met in the UN headquarters itself. We had programs for adults, we had programs for Rotaractors. Most years, the Secretary General of the United Nations was the keynote speaker, and if that was not possible, we would have the deputy or a very senior official from the UN. 3 years ago, for the first time, we had the Rotary Day at the UN in Geneva, at the European headquarters of the United Nations. The following year, we met in Nairobi at the African headquarters of the United Nations. Just to tell you a little story about that, I was part of the planning team for the event in Nairobi. I went down there. The United Nations Environment Program, which is the environmental arm of the United Nations, is based in Nairobi. So I asked to have a meeting with representatives of the UN environment. 5 young people came into the room, all sort of young environmental activist looking people. Unbeknown to us, the team leader turned out to be a Rotary Peace Fellow from New Zealand. Doesn't get much better than that. The second person was a former Rotary ambassadorial scholar. The third person was the president of one of the local Rotary clubs. We had prepared our Rotary elevator speech. We didn't need it. They knew what Rotary was all about. And they came with a list of 25 environmental projects which they thought might be of interest to clubs and districts around the world. That led to a meeting between then President Barry Rassin and the Chief Executive of UN Environment, which led to a meeting between John Hugo, the Chief Executive of Rotary, and senior officials of the UN Environment. And that led to a decision to establish a task force to prepare an environmental toolkit, a publication which can be used by clubs and districts to identify potential environmental projects, how to implement such projects, how to monitor, how to evaluate. The task force consisted of 3 groups: the staff at Evanston, the staff in Nairobi, and Rotary's Environmental Sustainable Rotary Action Group. And in Hamburg last year at the International Convention, this publication was formally produced. You can get it online, you can download it from the Rotary website. It's a really impressive, very professionally prepared toolkit, and a good example of an output, the result of a relationship between Rotary and a UN agency. And we're hoping to do similar toolkits in other areas of focus: maternal and child health care, education, and so on. We've had a number of other Rotary Days. We've had Rotary Days at the White House under the former administration, not under the current administration. We've had Rotary Days at the World Bank. Last year was the 75th anniversary of the signing of the United Nations Charter, and President Mark Maloney wanted to celebrate that fact and the relationship between Rotary and the United Nations, the 75th anniversary of that relationship, by holding 5 presidential conferences around the Rotary world. The first was held in New York last November, and then the others were scheduled for Santiago, Chile at the end of January, in Paris with UNESCO in February, in Rome in early May with the FAO, the Food and Agricultural Organization, culminating in the 5th event the day before the International Convention in Honolulu. And as you all know, sadly, the event in Chile had to be postponed because of protests in that part of the world, and the events in Paris, Rome, and Hawaii were cancelled because of the pandemic. Great shame for many reasons. The event in Hawaii would have been held on June the 5th, which is World Environment Day, and we had lined up a very impressive array of international UN speakers. It would have been a very significant event, but sadly it was not to be. This year, President Holger Kanak has agreed that we'll have 2 Rotary Days. One will be in Brussels over World Polio Day in October, celebrating the contributions which the European nations have made to the polio initiative. And the second will be in Geneva next March. The focus there will be with World Health Organization, focusing on maternal and child health. And I'm sure there'll be some reference to polio and to the pandemic. So we're excited about those 2 events. Holger will also be having 3 Rotaract conferences around the world. Earlier this year, he reached out to Rotaract clubs all around the world, inviting them to bid to be the host for these 3 conferences. I think one is going to be in Asia, one I think is in Europe, and the third one is going to be in my zone, Zone 33, in May of next year. And we're very excited about hosting President Holger and the Rotaract convention that's in the pipeline. I'm sure there'll be other Rotary Days coming up in the future. The focus of the representatives has changed. Initially, it was primarily the purpose of the representation was to promote the work of Rotary inside the senior levels of these organizations. Now it's much more of a two-way relationship. We can benefit from the lessons learned from UNICEF, from UNESCO, et cetera, et cetera. We're not looking for money. Of course, that would be nice, but that's not the purpose of the relationship. It's more to link these organizations with clubs and districts. Everything we do in the Rotary world should be designed to strengthen clubs and districts. So we're hoping that through the links that have been established, we will benefit from UNESCO's expertise in literacy programs all around the world. UNESCO, UNICEF, in particular UN Environment, are very large organizations. They have a presence in many parts of the world. We can learn a lot. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. By partnering with these organizations, we increase our credibility, our stature. And I might add that Rotary is a highly sought after partner. We are regarded as one of the leading civil society organizations in the world. I remember going to UNESCO headquarters a few years ago, and they really rolled out the red carpet. And there's nothing special about me, but the message was, we want to partner with Rotary. We admire what you've done. You have a wonderful brand. The two great strengths of Rotary, of course, are our powers of advocacy and the fact that we have so many boots on the ground. The advocacy has been critically important in terms of promoting the polio initiative. Every year, senior Rotarians from all the developed countries of the world go to their governments to lobby for an allocation for polio. In the United States, every year we have some past presidents who go to Congress. They speak to the Senate and House committees, appropriation committees, and every year we get the allocation that we have asked for. And the United States is by far the biggest single donor to the polio eradication initiative. We are hopeful, notwithstanding the current administration's policy towards the World Health Organization. We're hopeful that the polio allocation will not be affected. That money goes into a separate account. And we hope early next year to get a decision on that, but we are at this stage cautiously optimistic. So that's a lot about the United Nations. I think I'm so impressed with the internationality of your club. And Michael, you made this point in your remarks. Rotary, in many ways, is a local, grassroots, community-based organization, and that's right and proper. But we are also an international organization, and we celebrate the internationality of Rotary through global grants, Rotary Youth Exchange, Friendship Exchange, inter-country committees, and I know there's an active inter-country committee between Russia and the United States, and in many other ways. But it's the internationality of Rotary, and you see it at the International Convention and other big events, that really sets us apart and gives us such an important status in the humanitarian community. So I'm excited about the potential for Rotary internationally. There are a lot of exciting things going on at the moment. As you know, for the first time, at long last, we will soon have a female international president, Jennifer Jones. If you haven't had her as a speaker, you should try and get her. She's in great demand. She's a wonderful speaker, a wonderful ambassador for Rotary, a great role model for the females of our organization. She's very articulate, has a very strong Rotary background. She's a past vice president, she's a current trustee, and I think she will elevate Rotary to a whole new level of engagement and attract, we hope, a lot of female members. And of course, we are delighted that environment is now an area of focus, something we've been hoping for some time. When we do our surveys of Rotaractors, the two causes that most appeal to them are the environment and human rights. So environment, we've now got covered. Human rights, by that they mean human trafficking, domestic violence, gun violence, opioid crisis, those sort of issues, and a lot of clubs are actively involved in those areas. And of course, Rotary having been elevated now into on a par with Rotary, we are expecting exciting things coming out of that. And the other big initiative that you'll hear more about later on this year is a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. Rotary is in the process of establishing a task force to put some teeth into the statement that the board issued in January of last year. And I think later on in this year, you'll hear more about specific recommendations, policies, DEI champions, and so on. So a lot of exciting things going on. And of course, the transition that we made earlier this year from an organization that meets primarily in person to one that meets online, that has been just such a wonderful event. The reason for it is pretty tragic. The infections and the deaths are just awful. But it has really given a lot of scope for innovation and creativity around the Rotary world. We estimate that between 75% and 80% of all clubs are meeting online. So we have some work to do with the other 25%. Some of them suffer from internet access problems. In some cases, they're older clubs, people who don't feel quite as comfortable connecting via Zoom. But at the other end of the spectrum, we now become much more appealing to Rotaractors and young millennials, people who found Rotary either expensive or the timing of meetings was inconvenient. Now they can meet online, and we're seeing many more happening. So there may be a drop-off, and we're seeing a drop-off in membership at the upper end of the age spectrum, but we hope that that will be balanced in time with increases at the lower end of the age spectrum. So I've done a lot of talking, and I'm not quite sure whether I'm out of time. I'm a past district governor. I can talk all day. But let me pause, Michael, and if you agree, open it up to questions or anything else that you'd like me to talk about.
Yeah. Thank you, Peter. And before you run away here or whatever, your information is very intriguing, and I think because we have such an eclectic international group here, that there will be several questions. So if we would like, I will kind of monitor it. If you're going to have a question for Peter, on the bottom of your screen, there's a thing that says reactions. And on the reactions, there's a hand and then there's a thumbs up. If you click on the thumbs up, I will call on you and we'll let you ask a question to Peter and see if we can't get some answers from him. So that would be the easiest way to organize it. That way I know who's talking and we're not all talking at the same time. So if you have a question for Peter, you can click on the thumbs up that's on the bottom. I saw that Randall has already clicked first. So Randall, if you have a question for Peter, go right ahead and open your microphone and ask Peter your question.
Okay, I will keep it to one question today. I'm just very curious, Peter, you said there are 32 Rotary representatives around the world to the UN. Are they trained before they take on their role? And is their role defined, or is it kind of vague what they are to do in those different?
Sure. So they do get training every second year. We bring all the Rotary representatives to Evanston, at least pre-pandemic, and they have 2 days of training. They have job descriptions, they have terms of reference, they have key performance indicators. We've just completed another round of appointments. We've appointed a lady in Geneva, a professor of law. Her name is Christine Caduce. She's our representative to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. And we've another lady in New York to the New York office of UNHCR. We have appointed a woman to represent Rotary at the Committee on Women, which is quite an important UN agency. We've also had representation at the big environmental conferences, COP24, COP25. So they do get training in a Rotary sense. And over time, we hope to build their skills, their expertise. In some cases, the representatives have been in position for many years. Representatives in Paris have done a fabulous job, which is why Rotary is so well regarded by UNESCO in Paris.
Okay, next question. Anybody click on your button? Oh, I see one, Winslow. Winslow, you have a question.
Yes, Peter, could you say something about how Rotary might become more involved with the difficult but crucial issue of the abolition of nuclear weapons? This is the 75th anniversary of the Hiroshima disaster.
Right. So there's been quite a lot of discussion about that, and I know Anne Frisch is on the call, and others may be involved with Peace Rag in that area. Rotary staff have no particular expertise in this area, so there's been a reluctance to embrace it. Rotary supports individual Rotarians advocating for nuclear disarmament issues. There's no problem with that. But Rotary is a non-political, non-religious organization, and we're mindful that we need to keep that at the forefront of our thinking. It's a key factor in enabling Rotary to achieve 4-star status every year from Charity Navigator, which is the in the States that evaluates not-for-profits. So, as I say, there's a reluctance on the part of the board, Rotary generally, to make statements on all sorts of issues, such as abortion, such as same-sex marriage, nuclear disarmament. We don't get into that area. But as individual Rotarians are concerned, that, of course, they're free to do, and they are doing. And I don't see any issue with that from RI's point of view.
Okay. All right, Gabriella, you were the next to raise your hand, and then Carl, you'll be following after her. Gabriella?
Yeah, thank you so much. So at first, thank you very much, Peter, for very good and interesting ideas. You also mentioned preventing war. How can Rotarians, with all their activities, deepen friendship and contribute to prevent war, to prevent misunderstanding?
Well, that's a good question, and I think it's a very large question. Many Rotarians have asked in the past, what can I, as an individual, possibly contribute to peace and understanding? So one of the responses that Rotary has developed is, if you go to the Rotary Learning Centre, you can complete a course and you get a certificate. It's about a 3-hour course, and you get a certificate that you now have become a Rotary peace builder. And the idea is to provide opportunities that individuals can take up in their communities. I personally think that Rotary and Rotarians not only have the ability, but have the responsibility to be more engaged in community peace building. In the United States in particular, but all around the world, we have become a very divided society. And I think Rotary has the ability, and as I say, I think it has the responsibility to do what we can to help build trust and overcome divisions. We need to engage more with law enforcement, with the faith community, with education superintendents, with leaders generally. Next year, I'm introducing my own significant project in my 2 zones. It's called Rotary plus Youth plus Peace in Action. 100,000 young community peace builders. And the idea is in the 31 districts in my 2 zones, we'll be rolling out a whole range of individual events led in large part by Rotaractors, Interactors, and young people, peace building activities throughout the 2 zones. And this initiative is being led by 2 Rotary Peace Fellows. I'm excited about this. You'll be hearing more about it. And I think friendship exchanges, Rotary Youth Exchange, attending international conventions, there are many ways that Rotarians can develop friendships. When I look on the screen, I can see half a dozen people that I have met through Rotary that I would never have met otherwise. And that to me is one of the great joys of Rotary, the ability to meet internationally, and the fact that I'm presenting to you from Washington, D.C., and you're in St. Petersburg, and there are people from India, from other parts of the world, from Germany, other parts of the US. That in itself is amazing. And I think these sort of contacts, magnified 1,000-fold over time, will create a difference. Once polio has been eradicated, and we will eradicate polio, I think the Rotary Peace Centers program will be one of Rotary's most enduring legacies. We have around 1,400 Peace Fellows. They are outstanding ambassadors for Rotary. If you haven't had a Rotary Peace Fellow as a speaker, I commend them to you. They are some very good speakers. And many of them now are in positions of responsibility in governments, in private sector. So the investment that we have made in these fellows, we're beginning to reap the dividends. So that's a long-winded answer, Gabriel. I hope it in part answers your question.
Okay, Carl, you were next. Carl, will you please ask your question?
Yes, my question is, you briefly mentioned North Korea, but I missed the context. It just went by too fast for me. What was that about?
I commend Randall to you because he's the man who knows all about that. Randy, do you want to answer that question?
Just briefly to segue into how I met you. So when I was in China for more than 20 years, I might add, we did about 18 different projects with Rotarians, with Rotaractors, and I recall Anne Frisch was on the line for one of them. And we had the most recent project we worked with was to provide some tuberculosis medicine to North Korea from a donor, a financial donor in Taiwan, and the medicine would have to be channeled through China. And we had an issue at the beginning of this project that we needed to convince the Taiwanese donor that it was legally sound for them to make a donation of medicine to North Korea. And by finding Peter's contacts online as the dean, he was very instrumental in helping us to make contact with the 1718 committee, I think it's called, within the UN, that deals with United Nations sanctions on North Korea. And it was a bit of a long journey, but it was because of his pushing at the doors, opening the doors, that we finally got a response, and then we're able to ultimately follow it up. So that was very helpful, and that's why I appreciate that RI Director Peter is with us
It's a
today.
great story. And
Very good.
just amazing.
Very good. KK Chan, you were next. Question, please.
Thank you, Michael, for giving me an opportunity to put my question. I have two questions. One question directly for you, and one question to the speaker, Mr. Peter. The first question to you, Michael, is that I just am curious to, I don't know whether I can ask this question or not, but still I'm asking you to know that I find that St. Petersburg in Russia, and I'm not seeing many Russian Rotarians in the club. Probably, I'm sorry if I don't know. I'm just trying to know about it.
That's fine. That's fine to ask. There's a lady on the screen that's next to me. Her name is Gabriella. She's in Germany. She used to be the president here. And when she was the president here, we had mostly women, more women than men. And we had almost 50% Russians and 50% non-Russians. Over the last 5 years, the number of Russians in our club has gone down. We still currently have two. We still have currently two in our club, Russians, a man and a woman. But we also have 4 more active clubs in St. Petersburg that are almost all Russian, that are almost no internationals. I think they might have 1 international person in them. But the other 4 clubs are almost all Russians, and they're doing a very good job. We communicate with them frequently. But what we're trying to provide in our club is for those businessmen, those international people who come to St. Petersburg, such as yourself, if you came here to visit, you could come to a club where they would be speaking a language you understood. That's why we're focused on the English portion, and that's why we have fewer Russians in our club, because we are focused on the international Rotarians and providing them a source of refuge as well as a source of communications and connecting with Russia in English language, which is a language that many of them speak. If they're interested in clubs, when we introduce them to the other clubs, they're more than welcome to communicate with them if they can, and the other clubs are more than willing to participate in projects. It's just that in the other clubs, their English is not nearly as well, and often we get involved as an intermediary in the middle of those people to try and help out. But we still have 2 Russians, 1 man and 1 woman in our club, but there are 4 full-time Russian clubs here in St. Petersburg.
And to Peter, the question is that while he was, telling us about from 1942 onwards, the various things Rotary Club had taken, various projects taken up. You're mentioning that there are about 3 forthcoming, programs, one in Asia, one in Europe, and one in your own area, that's in probably in Washington. So I just would like to know in Asia, what is that and when is it, and whether any Rotarian is permitted to attend for that. This is my question. Thank you.
Thanks, KK, for the question. I don't know where in Asia or the dates. I can find out, but I'm sure that if you contact President-elect Shekhar Mehta or one of the Indian directors on the board, Kamal or Ranjit Pandya, they will give you that information. I don't have it at my fingertips, and certainly Rotarians will be absolutely involved. This will be a big event, I think.
Okay, Anne, you were next.
Thank you very much. I want to go back to Peter's comments about nuclear weapons education, and thank you for, we do appreciate RI's support on doing education, which is exactly what we're doing. We start with our four-way test of truth. If we do not abolish nuclear weapons, sooner or later they will be used. Our mission is to educate ourselves and each other about how nuclear weapons anywhere will affect Rotarians everywhere, and the very planet we inhabit. We are nonpartisan strictly. We look only at the impact on us and our fellow inhabitants of the planet. We want to save everyone. That is our nonpartisan stance. All views are welcome at our global meetings. And we have tried to reach out to RI to clarify, but I think they are getting the message, Peter, and I hope you will be our emissary to reassure RI that we are in no way a debate like abortion. We are strictly information. We use the best scientific information, no propaganda, no fake news, no misinterpretations of fact. We are strictly educational, and we are doing great in India and Pakistan. We have not had any opposition. People are saying, yes, we need this information.
Very good. Okay.
Fan.
Any comment about that, Peter, before we move on to the next question?
No, I'm pleased to hear that.
Great.
Education, I think you can't go wrong with education, whatever the field is. So
That we're doing.
Your work.
Any other questions from anyone? Hands up, anybody? Okay, Richard, you had a question? I'm sorry, you had a question?
Yes. First, I want to thank you very much, Peter, for this very enlightening and educational talk. I'm aware that the International Red Cross and Red Crescent is a similar organization to Rotary in its standing at the United Nations. And yet it seems to be much more involved in things such as the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons and in the Non-Proliferation Treaty hearings. And I'm wondering, again, is that an example that Rotary might follow?
Well, I think the aims of the two organizations are different. I think Red Cross has been much more direct. I'm not all that familiar with what Red Cross does. My understanding is it has been much more directly involved in issues that involve nuclear weapons, disarmament, etc. Rotary, the focus of Rotary has been on the 6 and now the 7 areas of focus. That's what we fund through the Rotary Foundation. That's what we support, and that's our primary contribution, if you like, to the international humanitarian objectives of the world. That's not to say that other issues are not important, but they're the 7 areas of focus that Rotary has chosen to focus on. So I don't see Rotary getting following the same example as the Red Cross, and what you tell me is true. I think the Rotary focus is going to stay with the areas of focus.
Okay, all right. Natalie, you had a question?
Okay, thank you, Peter, for wonderful presentation. I learned a lot, and you touched subject of peace. My question is, but before question, our Rotary Club in Beaverton now working closely with Russian Rotary clubs in building of culture of peace. And we got grant Russia for installation of peace poles in Russia. And what do you think about peace poles with message, may peace prevail on earth? It is good instrument in process of building culture of peace?
Well, I think, yes, the answer is yes. Certainly in the 50s and 60s and 70s, that was the big focus of Rotary clubs around the world. Establishing peace poles. We have peace cities. I think we have over 250 cities around the world that have adopted resolutions and have subscribed to being a city of peace. And Rotary has many cities that have subscribed to that program. For myself, I think in some areas a peace pole or a peace park, I mean, this is all good awareness. It promotes understanding, it promotes peace. These symbols are important ways to promote the organization. So I think they are supported. I think there are other activities in the peace dimension where I think Rotary can make a greater impact than through a peace pole or a peace park. But they all contribute to a greater or lesser degree to promote the humanitarian aspects of Rotary, to promote international understanding, goodwill, and peace.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else have a question? Show your symbol, and I'll call on you. We got time for about 2 more, and then we'll be wrapping it up. Any other questions? I don't see a hand. Okay, Richard, excuse me, Peter, I'm going to ask you a question. Oh, Gabriella, you got one more?
Yeah, thank you. Excuse me, one more question regarding great impact. We have so many influential Rotarians. Do you see a way, Peter, how we can support each other? There are many Rotarians in very high positions. How can we support each other to be perhaps more successful implementing peace?
Well, I think through events such as this, getting greater understanding, getting to know people, friendship exchanges have become very popular. I think it starts with the youth. I love the Rotary Youth Exchange program because I think sending young people overseas broadens their dimension, their language, their cultural understanding. These activities all cumulatively improve the prospects of greater international understanding, goodwill, and peace. So I think just getting together on a regular basis, sharing experiences. It's very easy now for you to attend a Rotary meeting anywhere in the world. I can attend hundreds of meetings, provided I have the Zoom link and my voice doesn't fail. I can attend Rotary Club meetings and I enjoy attending them. And I know my colleagues on the board feel the same way. So I think the technology has allowed Rotary to engage much more intentionally internationally, and that can only be a good thing. The more we get to meet, the more we understand, the more we share experiences, share ideas, develop joint projects. All this over time is the way we should be going, and I'm optimistic that Rotary is moving in a good direction. I think that pandemic will put us back a little bit in terms of membership and maybe in fundraising. We have graphs about this. We followed Rotary's growth from 1905, and the growth was up and up and up. Every time there was a major crisis like World War I or World War II or the Depression, there was a dip in membership. But then the climb continued until around 25 years ago when we plateaued at around 1.2 million. And that's a concern that we are internationally, we are declining. Some parts of the world, India and South Asia, are expanding rapidly. North America is declining quite dramatically. But I'm still confident that in the long run, Rotary is as relevant now, is as important now as it has ever been. And I hope the more we can do to maintain our friendship exchanges, our projects, our joint activities, the better.
Okay, very good. Randall, you have our last question before we wrap it up.
It's a quick two-part question, Peter. In your past, your first relationship, I believe, with Rotary was as an ambassadorial scholar. How did you find out about Rotary? And after your scholarship, how many years elapsed before you yourself joined as a Rotarian?
So I was a law student in Wellington, New Zealand, in 1970. One day I went up to the university to get the exam results. I found that I had passed the exams, and I cast an eye over the other notices on the notice board, and there down in the bottom of one of the boards was a notice which said, Rotary Foundation Ambassadorial Scholarship. I read that notice 3 times, and I thought, this is for me. In my youth, I always wanted to join New Zealand's Foreign Service, ultimately to be an ambassador, and here it was, an opportunity to go overseas, an opportunity to study. There was a name and a telephone number. I called that person that night. A few days later, we met, and the rest is history. I came back from America in 74 rather. In late 75, I was made a partner in my law firm, and one of the first people to call and congratulate me was my Rotarian counselor. And he said, you've now satisfied the Rotary classification criteria. We'd like you to join the club. And I've been to the club on many occasions. This was long before females joined the club, but it was a very congenial group, mainly professional people. And I had no hesitation. I joined the club in 1976. Since then, I've been in 4 clubs. I'm in my 4th club. I spent, as I said, 5 years in the Philippines. I was in a Rotary Club in Manila. Then I went back to Auckland. I had 7 years in a Rotary Club in Auckland. And now I'm in the Capitol Hill Club in Washington, D.C. So it's been a long Rotary journey.
Well,
thank you.
Well, we're all very happy that you decided to continue. So for all of us, let's please give Peter a warm welcome round of applause. Everybody, please.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed meeting you all.
Thank you, Peter. Now, in our club, we normally give the speakers we have, when they're here live, we give them a present. And the present that we are currently giving out, I'm going to pass to you, but only I have to do it electronically because I can't do it live. I'm an author who writes books on leadership and other items, and what we normally do is give our guest speakers free books. So I'm going to send you a book that's called Looking Up, and I'm going to send you a book that's called Fire Up. And I think both of these are appropriate because many of us look up to you. We look up to you as being one of those people up in the hierarchy of Rotary who knows what's going on and is actually physically trying to make a change. So somebody we look up to. And as far as Fired Up, now I'm not sure if you're older than me, but I think you might be slightly, but you're still fired up. You know, you still got fire in your belly. You still want to do things like myself and many of the other members on the screen here who are past 60, and I won't say how old, but many of them are past 60 and still got fire, still have energy, still want to make a difference. So my 2 books, The Looking Up and Fired Up, I will send you those electronically to your address and you can download them in PDF file. If you were here or if whenever you do come to St. Petersburg, I'll give you a couple of copies, but that's what we normally give our speakers who come to visit us and see what's going on here. So again, thank you very, very much for your outstanding presentation. I've got just a little bit more work to do, and then we will be finished with the meeting. If anybody wants to chat afterwards, they can. I'm almost finished. Get on here. All right, planning stages. Our next meeting is 26 August, which is going to be live at the Angel Tier Hotel at 1900 hours. It's a closed meeting for our members who are online tonight. It's a closed meeting, and we're going to be talking about our projects and membership. Those are our two key focus for goals for this year. So we'll be planning on projects and membership on the 26th. We will have a board of directors meetings on Saturday, excuse me, on the 28th. I will give you the location and time later on to all the board members, but the board meeting will be on the 28th. Our next regular meeting is going to be on 2 September. And because we missed a social about 3 weeks ago, we're going to have our quarterly social event on the 2 September. Not sure where we're going to go yet, but we're going to go somewhere and have some fun and socially get to know each other a little bit better and enjoy ourselves. For all of our visiting guests, and tonight there was 33 or 34 of you folks, the next online meeting we're going to have is going to be on September the 9th. And we have Ulrika Cavalier, I'm not sure I know how to pronounce his name, Cavaliga. He's from Italy, from the Milan Digital Club, and he's going to be our guest speaker. And from what I heard, he's a dynamic speaker. So I'm really looking forward to that. And that's going to be our next online meeting. So if you'd like to join us online again, it'll be on the 9th of September. Now, as you guys get ready to leave, we want to thank all of you tonight for being here. I don't know how Randall, myself, Andres, Walter, the people that we have in our club, I don't know how we draw so many people from around the world to come to our club, but we do. We are very, very appreciative of that. And if any of you want to come to St. Petersburg after the restrictions are lifted, you will be certainly welcome here, and we will be very hospitable to you. But until we see you live, and I know we're going to see many of you online again, but until we see you live, we hope that you stay safe, you stay happy, you stay healthy, and you stay a Rotarian. You do those things, and I think the whole world is going to be a whole lot better than what has been in the past. It's getting everybody together that that is important, and that's what we need to do now. We need to get everybody together. And Randall, you want to hit, if everybody will turn your screen on, Giovanni and Hank, if you turn your screen on, we'll take a screenshot, please. Can you do that for us, Randall?
I can do that for you, Michael.
Okay. Tell me when, and we'll all smile nice and big and get a good picture on screen.
Oh, you want people to smile? Okay, just 1 second.
Yeah, I think there's two slides. I think
everybody
so you're gonna need to
wave your hand.
You'll need to do it twice. Yeah.
Okay.
Got it?
Keep going. One more, bit more. Okay, got it.
Yeah, you got both sides? Yep.
Yep, got both sides.
Very good. So,
thank you, Michael. I'm signing off. Thank you very much. Namaste to all of you.
We'll be in touch. I got to close the meeting. Hold on 1 second, KK. I got to close the meeting. The meeting is now officially closed. Meeting is closed.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.